Movidiam podcast. Join the conversation with global innovators as they share their journeys, discuss the state of the industry, and share insight into the future of media for brands, agencies, and production companies.
Hello and welcome to the Movidiam Creative Leaders podcast. Today I'm delighted to welcome Paul Greeves. Paul's had a very interesting career and is today the Managing Director of First Option Safety Group, but that has gone through being a Director of Workplace and Safety at the BBC and also been a Lieutenant Colonel in the Parachute Regiment. So Paul, welcome to the Movidiam podcast.
Thanks. Nice to be here.
Paul, it's a very interesting sort of CV. I mean, should we just start there before we go into the where you are today? But can you just give us a little bit of context and background on your sort of career journey to date, and how it's taken you from the military to production?
Yes, it's quite a journey. I sometimes wonder myself. I had as you said, I had a full military career, about 24, nearly 25 years in the British Army, which was great. I enjoyed it immensely, and I think learnt a huge amount. But I got to a point in life where the military career is very demanding on your family and that kind of thing. So I wanted a change. So I did an MBA, and I spent a little bit of time in business in a couple of things, and then washed up in the BBC. And my first role there was very related to my sort of military background, which was really looking after journalists and other program makers in hostile environments, challenging assignments. And I sort of graduated over a dozen years to run all of their safety and business continuity and security aspects, and then eventually spent a bit of time running their property portfolio. So that was fascinating and interesting. I had a wonderful time there. But as these things do, they run their course, and I left that to join First Option, who I thought were an up-and-coming company in this space, and I've been with them for 5 years, and that's where we are today.
And First Option, what's the core premise? What's the core premise of First Option for our listeners that might be in production or run agencies across the globe?
Well, essentially, we provide the sort of safety risk management function that you might, if you were a very large broadcaster or production company, you might have in-house. But for most production companies, they don't want to have that in-house. So we provide that service to them. So we're retained by most of the UK large indies and many of the smaller ones, and work a lot with the studios and streamers and the broadcasters. And we provide risk management advice and sort of practical production support, along with training and equipment and all the things that you would expect an in-house risk management safety team to do, except as a sort of outsourced service. So that's basically the central premise of it.
Great. And in terms of this particular challenge that we're going through right now with this COVID-19, I mean, what are some of the questions, or how have you responded? Because presumably it was all frozen first, and then it's sort of production is sort of thawing as we're able to go and interact with each other, and marketing teams want to start building content again.
No, exactly, and it's a new challenge for everyone, and including us, because although we've and I've personally dealt in the past with SARS and swine flu and Ebola and other pandemics, nothing really on this scale. And of course, we've been dealing with this because we have a lot of journalism and natural history clients. So we've been dealing with this since it first appeared early in the year. But we're all learning every day, and it's a moving target. And I think what's becoming clear is that while the science is still, has got some work to do, the understanding of the disease is becoming much clearer. And I think that is allowing us, as we get a grip of it, to think about getting back into serious production. So it's a very challenging time for everybody, including us, but one that we're hopefully rising to.
And in terms of the sorts of productions, I mean, is it advertising productions, feature film, news, broad? I mean, what are the where? I mean, all of the above have security concerns.
Yes, no, we support across the range, and also some sort of non-production events and some venues. for instance, we support the Royal Opera House and some theatres and that kind of thing, Edinburgh Festival. But yeah, it's right across the board. Of course, what we're seeing at the moment is that a lot of production has continued, of course, in the journalism space and in factual production, and even some factual entertainment. We're now seeing more fiction-based drama, some bigger entertainment shows sort of gearing up, and features who need to get back into production are all looking at how they can do so under the sort of very different circumstances that we all now find ourselves in.
And it is as words people have been using a lot, but unprecedented. I mean, are you rewriting the sort of manual on things alongside government advice, or I mean, people are happy to go back to work if they've got the masks on and they're maintaining a distance, or are you sensing that people are production types are genuinely pretty dynamic and in engaging and can-do types of people? I mean, how are you finding the response?
Yeah. I mean, essentially, in one sense, it's from our point of view, just another hazard, and the existing sort of rules and regulations around all that haven't changed. So this is just sort of dealing with another safety issue. But of course, it's a very pervasive one and affects the way everything is done, because essentially the real control, as we all know, to preventing the spread of the disease is to not gather together, as individuals and as groups. So. And that's, has to happen for meaningful production to take place. So it's really about finding the ways to make that happen in a safe way. In terms of how people are reacting, this is a very interesting point, and it is with all safety issues, and that's the whole business of risk perception. And we've seen huge swings of perception really in this. If you think back a few months ago, it was quite difficult for governments and authorities to get people to really take this pandemic seriously. People felt this was something that happened to relatively few people, mainly elderly, those with underlying health conditions, etc. Now, after 2.5-3 months of restrictions, people are, and having seen the impact of this and having seen the impact of it on individuals in intensive care units and that kind of thing, people are rightly very nervous about it. A lot of people. I think that will adjust as people get more used to getting back out into the workplace and into the community. I think their risk perception will adjust and perhaps lessen a little. There's a danger in that, of course. You can go too far the other way. But I certainly the experience that we've had is that on the productions that we've been supporting recently, the first few days have been tricky. People have been nervous, uncertain about what they need to do. New things have to be put in place. But then people very quickly adapt, especially, in the creative production world. They very quickly find new ways of doing things. They very quickly get used to it. And whereas, they might have said they would like our support for the whole period, after a few weeks they're saying, you know what, we don't need you so much. So,
yeah.
Which is a good sign. I mean, it's excellent. So, I think people do adapt.
And how does the insurance business play into the area of work that you're in the sort of risk management? And because I know some insurance companies have come under a bit of fire for not honouring some of their agreements or navigating around the wording. I mean, is media insurance production, do you interface with that risk management side of your business?
Very much so, and of course this is a huge issue in lots of places. And I wouldn't be critical of the insurance industry. They've taken an enormous hit. Production insurance. I think somebody was telling me that the losses from production interruption in the UK amount to something like £400 million. So, it's understandable that they're a bit nervous about underwriting that kind of risk as we go forward. I think there's definitely movement there. I think the insurance companies are trying to find a way to do it. I think they're perhaps looking for, also some government support. And it's all about them getting the confidence that we can do things, at a reasonable risk level. So we're very much hoping we can play a part in that and developing some strategies and regimes which will get them comfortable so that productions can be insured, because an awful lot of productions, of course, just can't happen unless they can get insurance.
Sure.
Some can. The big players can perhaps insure themselves, but for many, it just isn't going to happen until we sort the insurance problem out.
And in terms of gathering or gaining new business or visibility for your business, how does your marketing work? Is it to demonstrate the risks that are being taken without proceeding with caution and your advice? Or how do you build momentum inside your pipeline?
Well, we haven't. We don't do a lot of sort of active marketing, particularly. We've built up a client base over a dozen years. We do a good job for them, we hope. The production community, being what it is very mobile. And if we supported people on one production, they'll generally take us to the next one. So business is traditionally built like that. Of course, at the moment, I've used this phrase a lot, only partly just health and safety has never been so popular.
Yeah.
And we're getting an awful lot of attention, and people want answers, and we're having to scrabble hard to keep up with the government guidance, to keep up with the science and what's known about the virus and what is best practice in countering it, and package that and provide it to clients so that they can make plans to get back to work. So certainly, this is to some extent our time, and we hope we can rise to the challenge. We're certainly doing our best to do that.
Very interesting. And I think people will be looking to sort of belt and braces on this particular issue because it's affected everyone. Simultaneously. It's a water cooler moment.
Well, and I think in normal times, our business is supporting productions where typically it's a big, reasonably sized production, lots of moving parts. They want to know that things are properly covered and that everybody's doing the right thing, because accidents are incredibly disruptive, expensive, and of course sometimes terrible for the individuals involved. So what's different here is, of course, this is productions typically very experienced, and they know how to handle most of the safety issues themselves. They don't particularly need our support necessarily. Now this is all new, and I think they are looking for some external support to make sure all the right things are being put in place, and that they are going to be able to get on with their production without either people contracting the disease and getting hurt, or the production being interrupted by that and being derailed, and everything coming off the road. Mm. So it's an interesting time from that point of view.
And when you're looking at sort of these Hollywood feature movies or the car chases or any of these kind of wild things that happen in production, do you watch these things with a very different lens to most, thinking, gosh, that must have had a safety cordon at this stage? Does it lessen your enjoyment of these things, being the safety option people?
No, I don't. I enjoy a good action film as much as the next person. Still, I do sometimes marvel at particularly some
what
of the
is achieved.
The stunt, yes, exactly. Some of the things that the stunt people do and the special effects people do. To some extent, I suppose anybody who works in production, the veil has been lifted a little bit, and you sort of know what's happening. But no, that doesn't spoil my enjoyment of it. In fact, I love watching things that we've worked on. There's a huge sense of satisfaction seeing things that we've achieved, and sometimes things which look incredibly risky and dangerous, but we've worked out ways how
to mitigate it.
Yeah, exactly.
So you must be hungry for the next Michael Bay movie to come out, going to get on that job. Whereas the Aardman animations are perhaps less concerning.
Well, exactly.
Unless you swallow the Play-Doh.
It's fair to say that the Aardman stop animation doesn't really require a lot of support from us, but some of the some of the bigger spectacles certainly, can benefit from it.
Well, Paul, look, it's been fantastic just to dive into that and have a quick conversation this morning as we sort of ultimately come out of the first phase of lockdown on the 4th of June. There's some very interesting resources on firstoption.group. And there's a PDF which I'm sure we'll share as well about potential safety interests during this COVID time period that we're going through. So, Paul, thanks very much for your time today on the Creative Leaders podcast, and no doubt we'll catch up 6 months, maybe a year down the line when the production landscape has changed again.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to the Movidiam podcast. Movidiam is a world-class network of production talent complemented by secure tools that blend hiring, communication, and payments. Find out more at movidiam.com.